Right, this post is about seasoning firewood. Not seasoning timber, that's kind of different. Although the two terms and usages overlap, of course. This is my firewood, and you can see it's all very, very pale. Except for this bit here. We'll come back to this bit here. This bit isn't supposed to be here. All looks like this. Now this is hazel. If you go and look on various places, you'll see that there are signs of that timber is seasoned, such as checking in the ends. You see that split. The bark is loose. But that's not always the case. This bit is neither cracked nor is the bark loose, except here, which has been on the end of the 5 foot length. Because this isn't seasoned as logs, this is seasoned as cordwood, which is 5 foot lengths, stacked in the wood, basically over the summer, and then brought in here over the winter. Sometimes, if I miss getting up there at the end of the summer and the rains start, I can't bring it back. So like all this material here, this has actually been in the wood for 2 years, and you can see that a few of the individual stems are just starting to spalt. You see that? This is still perfectly sound, but this is the start of decay. More on decay in a minute. This bit here, this is seasoned, and there's a little bit of dead here, and that's spalted. And on the end, this has been the end of the 5 foot length, where it's been up in the cord in the wood for 2 years, and you can see it's discoloured. This is the interior, and this is what it looks like when it's split, so it's all the same all the way through. And this is well under 20% moisture. This has not been kiln dried, this has just been seasoned and then dried. Because the way I think of it, there's two components to preparing your firewood to burning. There's seasoning and there's drying. So seasoning, a season is obviously a quarter of a year. If you leave it out for a season, then you leave it out for 3 months, quarter of the year. If you do seasoning, you leave it out for a longer period, and the time that it takes to dry depends on the size of the timber and the condition it's in when it's felled. I do all my felling hopefully before the sap rises in the spring, so I fell in the winter. After the sap rises, there'll be more sap in this area here, which is the actively living part of the tree. But trees also transpire, and there are semi-active processes which happen in this area of the tree, which transport water from the roots to the crown and then out of the crown. That's called evapotranspiration. If the sap starts to rise and the buds start to swell, the tree is basically preparing for that. If you fell in the summer and the leaves are all out, there'll be more water in here than in the winter when the sap is down. So seasoning is basically the time that it stays out and it dries slowly and naturally in the round if it's timber, or cut and split if it's logs, except the way I do it. And that's basically the passive process of getting rid of the life water of the wood. The life water of the wood is basically the water which is in the living tissues, and that includes all of this, and which the tree uses to mediate all its processes, such as photosynthesis, such as respiration, such as chemosynthesis of materials such as this, which is the wood, which is predominantly cellulose, although there are a lot of other complex carbohydrates in there as well. That water, obviously, without it, the tree can't live. So seasoning, in my view, is getting rid of all that life water. Once that's happened, however long it takes, you then get into drying. So what I do is season in 5 foot lengths in the wood, by which time the timber is dead, there's no life in it. If you scratch the bark, it's brown underneath and not green, because thin bark species such as hazel and ash, if If you scratch the bark and it shows green, it's still alive. And eventually it goes like this. So once the live water's gone, I bring it back here at the end of the summer, as I say, or sometimes the end of the following summer, after a whole year plus a summer out in the woods. And then I cut it into lengths and then I store it under cover, which is what I've done here. And this is pretty good seasoned wood. So that's hazel, more hazel. This, you can see the bark is different. This is ash, and this is treated exactly the same as I've mentioned with the hazel. It's not been seasoned as logs outside. Right, going to break there and then come back. So when I store it, it's stored in a place such as this. And you see this is built out of scrap timber. This was actually sawn from a giant Christmas tree. And this is all bits of pallet. This is pallet, all pallet, another bit pallet. And you can see with the eye of faith in the back, look, there's this stuff on the back wall which faces south. This is basically just pallet laid over, and you can see through just about to the next door store, which is open at the side. And this is basically for timber that I use for making things, bits of pallet and steel and bits of wooden rubbish. On the other side, another store which is open. At the moment it's got car wheels and boat ropes and dead machinery, but I built this to dry my dry suit. And there you can see on the top, got an overhang, quite a nice overhang. This bit here is just offcuts of the cladding which I used on the outside. That's the only bit I bought, and the nails. This is basically put together with nails from pallets and screws, so that it's got good airflow. And this stuff on the back and on the roof, the other side of this pallet timber, is one-way vapor membrane. So it basically stops water coming through, but allows water vapor to go out. And this is how I do the final drying. Stick it in here, and certainly in the summer, especially as this big side and the roof faces south, it gets nice and warm in here and it loses water vapor. There's a gap at the top and there's a gap here, so plenty of airflow. And this is only covered up to about waist high with these, so that basically stops rainwater coming off, dripping off. Gutter catches most of it, and blowing in, because our prevailing wind and our rains in the winter comes from southwest, which is that way. So why do I bother drying it after seasoning it? Because seasoning only gets rid of part of the moisture in the wood. By seasoning you can get it down below 20%. By drying it as well, you can get it a lot lower. If you've got water in your wood and you're burning it in a fire, that water is basically lowering the temperature of combustion and altering the efficiency of combustion. And you're basically producing steam. And if you remember back to your physics you did in school, you might remember that to change the phase of water from ice to water takes an awful lot of energy. You can put energy in to get it from 0 degrees C as ice to get it to 0 degrees C as water. That takes a lot of energy. There's a similar phase change where you turn it from liquid in the wood to steam, and that takes a lot of energy, more energy than you might think. So by drying it, you get rid of as much water as possible. Right, break there and come back. So wood here has been seasoned and dried. Now this stuff here, we'll go through this in a minute, but this one here, for instance, you see all this white material? It's freezing here today, and there's lots of white material everywhere. But this isn't snow, this is fungus. This is the fruiting body of the fungus. See, it's all sort of rubbery. And there's more on the outside. this has gone past seasoning and is getting into rot. Let's say you've left your timber out over the summer. It's been a nice long hot summer, so your timber is nice and dry, down below 20%. It's in small size here and it's nicely seasoned. So it's seasoned and dry. But if you leave it out through the autumn and into the winter, then it's uncovered. All the sky, certainly in Dorset here, pisses water on it, and sometimes snow as we have at the moment. And your nice seasoned and dry timber that's outside remains seasoned. It has been out for at least 2 seasons. In fact, seasoning is increasing in terms of the time it's left out. But the timber is again starting to take up water. One of the issues with seasoning is that the bark on the wood, when the tree is alive, basically has evolved to keep water in the tree to reduce losses. In fact, there are lenticels in bark. You can't really see them on hazel, but those are little pores that allow the living material of the wood in the cambium here and in the phloem to exchange gases with the atmosphere, so the tree can respire and take in gases for photosynthesis, although most photosynthetic gases go in and out through the leaves through other little pores called stomata, which are different. But in seasoning, the important bit is that the bark, when it's alive, retains moisture, and it does that to a certain extent in seasoning. When it's fairly small like this, your water loss is gradual, but as it's fairly small, you can get rid of the life water over a summer, especially if it's a nice hot summer. If it's in a large lump like a tree trunk, it takes longer. In fact, there are lots of old wives' tales that seasoning takes a year per 4 inches of girth, or 12 inches of girth, or whatever, depending on who you talk to. So the seasoning's happened, the tree's dead, the life water's gone, and it's the end of the summer, the autumn rains are coming after the equinox. The bark is still there, the bark is not alive, but it's still reducing the amount to which the interior of the wood can take up water. It's still semi-waterproof. That means that on the ends of the wood it can take up more water than it can on the end. So if I flip this over, this has been cut fairly recently from a 5-foot length, still nice and dry inside. Another telltale that's been left out over the autumn is it's got this green crap on the outside. This is one of many different things that actually lives on bark. This is a thing called chlorococcus, which is an alga. It's here as well, but this stuff is not dead, but it's definitely dormant, and this is alive and it's photosynthesizing this bright green. Wandered off a bit off the track there. So anyway, water gets into the end and it sits in the open cells. You've actually cut through vessels by actually cutting this and cutting it when it's alive and felling it. And those little vessels can retain moisture a little bit like the ends of straws. And fungi can actually move in, and this is the start of fungal decay, this discoloration. Other fungi actually live in the wood and can move through it. You've got the start of it here. This is spalting. And this here you can see, this is the outside. This is a disc taken off, and you can see that decay has actually gone into the wood and is now travelling up those longitudinal vessels which run all the way up the tree. If you get it inside and under cover, although this happens, this spalting won't happen. Right, another break there so I can have a little bit of a cough and then come back. Okay, this is a spalted log. This has gone a little bit further than that one I just showed you, and you can see you've got areas of colour around where each fungal mycelium, the mycelium is the body of the fungus, it's little tiny threads called hyphae which work their way through into the tissues, dissolving as they go, and this discoloration is caused by different fungi acting on the wood and antagonising each other. It's caused by that in part. So this is almost like chemical warfare going on between different mycelia within the wood. And you can see here, if we can get this propped up, this is obviously more sported, more rotten than the tissue around it. This is still sound wood. If you dry it down, it will still burn nice and clean. But by decay actually starting, that is dissolving the cellulose, using the cellulose to respire and for energy for the fungus's life, you're breaking that down to turn it into water and carbon dioxide, which is the components that it originally came from. We might go into that in a little while. So this is sporting, still sound. This, on the other hand, is rotting. You see the fungal fruiting bodies, and this here, you can start to stick your finger in it. Obviously, you know, if it goes further, it gets really soft, and by that time, most of the cellulose is gone, and you're left with other compounds, which is forming a skeleton to keep the rotten wood alive. Not alive, more or less intact. And you can see that. Oh Jesus, they're stuck together. You can see that here. This is a bit of oak. You can't really see the heartwood, which is here, and the sapwood, because it's again started to decay and discolour on the end. But you can just about see the annual rings. And you can see here, this was really soft, but it's frozen this morning. This is the sapwood, which is not naturally durable. On oak, the heartwood is durable. It's got a lot of tannins in it, which are compounds still used today in tanning leather. Stop it from decomposing. And that's the situation with this. The material, the heartwood, sapwood, without the tannins, has decayed. And this, you can still dry it, get it nice and dry, and it'll still burn clean, but there won't be very much in the way of heat value in it. Combustion, of course, is the process of turning your fuel, in this case the cellulose and other complex hydrocarbons in here, into water vapour, carbon dioxide, heat and light, which is the opposite of what the plant does when it photosynthesizes to build up the cellulose of its body in the first place. Sported here, and you can just see on the edge, hopefully, you've got some blue material, because these sported patterns, which are in demand for things like wood turnery, for decorative stuff or decorative planking, they come in all different colours. You can get blues, you can get reds, you can get yellows, as well as the blacks and browns. So that's seasoning kind of in a nutshell. This is my firewood, and it burns nice and clean. So you've got some ends, these are still nice and dry. You've also got flaws in the wood, such as here, and that's basically where a branch has been snedded off to give myself a straight length. And you can see that that's starting to decompose, but it hasn't travelled up and down the wood. So these are going to go out of here, back into my other store, where they're going to be laid aside to dry a little bit longer, and this will eventually go on the fire. So this is how I season my firewood. So it's a cord on the edge of the wood, underneath the eaves of the wood, which is along here. But this, believe it or not, is a lot more breezy than it is further in, even after I've cut an area coppice, as in there. The woodland basically, because of edge effects and other things, has its own microclimate. So this catches the breeze. You can see the ivy leaves swaying. So it'll sit here until the end of the summer. And you see it's all fresh felled, and it's wet with snow, which is melting, which is you might have seen when I first started filming. There was a little wren over there. They come along and they look for insects and various things, and they get onto the snow as it's melting, and then they drink that. But you can see the difference between this cord, which is stuff fresh felled this year, and this cord, which was felled this time last year. And this has been up here for a year, well, just on a year now, so one summer, and it'll come out at the end of this summer as soon as the field goes hard, because I need to come in the bottom gate and downhill, because I've only got a two-wheel drive vehicle, and out at the gate down the bottom, downhill all the way, just about get it in up this slope, and then spin it around and back it into here, and chuck everything in the back and on the trailer. Anyway, difference between this cord and that cord, can you see it? Yeah, this is covered in snow. This timber was actually dry at the end of the summer, and I suspect because it's remaining dry, it's just a little bit warmer, so the snow will melt quicker. Same amount of snow will have fallen on that as would have fallen on that. You can see all the moss is all alive. If you get timber with moss delivered, does it feel wet, or does it feel nice and dry in the winter? Because this will stay alive, almost estivated, almost in suspended animation. When it's dry, it'll stay green. It'll eventually go brown if it stays dry too long. Then as soon as it gets the moisture, it will start growing again. I think mosses are amazing, but that'll be going down a totally different path, and I need to stay on subject. So this will be seasoned here over the summer and go at the end of the summer. This is showing this black discoloration all the way over it, and this is where fungi have already started to multiply on the ends of the wood. Where they've got further in, such as this one, this was probably dead when it was felled, and this one has got fungal fruiting bodies on it. See how that looks different from the snow? So that will have made its way well into here. This is probably the same individual fungus, individual mycelium, more all the way through here. But most of the timber will be sound, and when it's dry it'll burn nice and clean. Let's have a look at these ones. The first ones I cut are these ones here, and you can see that they're already getting little black spots on them, so that's moulds and rusts starting to work, or moulds rather than rusts. Rusts only live in live material, and this is probably live, but well, we won't go there. That'll just stay in the end and won't be able to get very far in by the end of the summer, because hopefully come April time it'll start to really dry out. It'll lose moisture slowly through the bark, because the bark is still alive at this stage. Let's get my knife out, essential tool for working in the woods. And look, and you can see here, see the green? This is chlorophyll just under the bark, and that is still going to be photosynthesizing when it's warm enough. And this is cambium and phloem underneath. Phloem is the ring of live tissue under the bark which flows, photosynthate from the leaves down towards the roots to keep the roots alive and to keep them pumping, inverted commas, water up to the top of the tree for carrying nutrients.